Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Roast into Ceilings podcast. Today we have on a guest, Melissa. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Melissa Lombardo. I am an author. I'm a Connecticut in the United States, a Connecticut certified sexual assault crisis advocate. I am also a survivor, and I wrote a book and performance piece about my own hurt, healing, and hope after sexual assault when I was in my 20s.
Mhm. Now, I want to kind of ask you about that title, the hurt, healing, and then hope. Um, would you say like these are like all three steps that are necessary in the kind of healing process? Like, can you explain a bit about the third bit, like the hope there? Like, what comes after the healing?
Yeah, no, of course. So I realized, well, first I want to say that healing is never linear, and there's always a back and forth. Nobody is going to experience any trauma the same way. Everybody is going to experience, in general in life, everyone experiences things in different ways. You can both be at the same event and you both have different takebacks of how it went, or who was there, or what it looked like, and and all the sensations. It's the same thing with trauma, especially a trauma of sexual assault, and nobody's going to experience it the same way. And depending on our background and who we are and our other past experiences, we all might process in a different way as well. So that being said, that that healing is never linear. And when I was in college, I was sexually assaulted, and I ended up receiving services at a crisis center in the area where I lived at the time. And the counselor there, she encouraged me to journal. She encouraged me to write about my experiences. She gave me writing prompts, and I started to write. It wasn't until many years later, and this is where Maggie's question, comes in about the hurt, healing, and hope. And I started, thinking about, just reflecting on what was my process post sexual assault in those days, weeks, months, even years after the sexual assault. Kind of what did I go through? And I went and got my journal entries, and I started looking into them, and I developed my own common theme, that there were journal entries that were about immense hurt and how I was feeling at the time, and moments where I was so depressed that there wasn't anywhere lower that I can go, and because I was there. And then I noticed that in those same journals, as time went on, I had some entries that were written about healing. Not that I'm healed, but that I might have felt that I took a step. There's one journal entry that was about dancing. I used to love to dance, prior to the sexual assault, and then after the sexual assault, for shame or any other other feelings I was feeling, I just decided not to dance anymore. And there was one journal entry about moving my foot to the beat of a music. It was just that little step, and that for me signified that I had a little bit of healing that took place. And then I realized that, as time went on, I started feeling a little bit more hopeful that there is, something after this, that this experience doesn't define me. And I had a few moments of journaling where I was able to see that little bit of hope that there's something beyond this immense hurt that I'm feeling. But at the same time, Maggie and also Isabella, that I also went back and I had other journal entries after that hope or after that healing that were still hurt. So it kind of went back and forth in those moments and months and years after the sexual assault as well. So that's what the basis of the title of the book is. It's Hurt, Healing, and Hope, Thriving Beyond Sexual Assault. And because it was my own process of how I went through hurt, healing, and hope. And I think there are always elements of of trauma and of experiences like sexual assault where you're going to obviously go through the hurt, and you're also going to move in to healing. And hopefully you'll be able to see that through the support of friends or families or counseling, or just as time goes on, you hopefully you're able to see that there is a hope that you could come through this and be able to hopefully thrive someday as well. I didn't think of my life in terms of thriving until more recently. I started to think, wow, I'm doing this now. I'm writing this book to publish to be able to help others. That's one of my goals in life, to be able to support others who are healing. am I perhaps thriving, or, am I healed? And I don't think I'm healed, because, I think it's still linear. I still have a few triggers, and I still have moments, but at the same time, I'm definitely not letting the experience control me as I did maybe, 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago. It was still that, close in my mind. So I'm sorry, that was a long answer to the question. I hope I responded to you.
Really, thank you so much for sharing that. I think the takeaway of that healing isn't linear is really important for a lot of people to hear, because I know a lot of people be like, oh, I feel like I was doing so well, but I woke up today and I feel really horrible. So that means my healing process was like set back. So I think it's really important for everyone to hear that, like, hey, this is normal. It's a normal part of healing. You still are healing. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
And I also really love what you said about kind of having that small movement in your foot and then feeling the feeling of dancing again. And I really love that you kind of emphasize that that small bit of hope is still hope, and that eventually you're able to find that goal to help other people heal and other people thrive. So I was wondering if you had any advice for people trying to find that bit of hope or trying to find that goal, because I imagine that'd be a difficult thing to do to get to that point.
It was. I remember in the beginning, I I used to like to walk in the park. I used to like to go once in a while to a restaurant, go out and meet people. And, I was never somebody to that. Let's see, how would I explain this? Let's see. So I was never one to, to go out and do crazy wild things, but I always liked to, do things that enabled me to meet people from different parts of the world. So when I talk about, meeting people, I was very involved at university in the international club, and I loved meeting people from different countries and learning about different cultures and food. So I would love to go to an Ethiopian restaurants or Japanese restaurants or Korean restaurants, wherever it was. So I think after that, after the experience, I stopped doing that for a while. I dressed differently after that because I was just scared that, something else would happen to me, things like that. And it was actually through, this is indirectly answering your question, it was actually through friends and family that I ended up opening up to little by little. And that's actually how I got to counseling, and that they helped bring back that hope to me. Those were some of the glimmers of hope. I think it's really important for, somebody who, especially in high school and, beyond, if I think about it now, and just, thinking about coming on this podcast, I was thinking, the people that might be listening to this are maybe 15, 16, 18, 20 years old. And that was the same age that things were happening to me. And I was in a manipulative relationship when I was in high school, of somebody who was very controlling. And then a few years after that, it was the, if you want to say, re-victimization through the sexual assault. And when I think about it now, and I'm in my 40s now, thinking back of just how young I was and just how young, people are going through an experience like this, and it's just so much to handle, and it's so much to take on. And so I think, I think if there was a takeaway, I guess, of advice, or something I would want to leave with listeners, just having people know that no matter what your age, no matter what you look like, or how you dressed at the moment, it's not your fault. And really, I think if I had known some of the things that I know now, or if I had listened to a podcast such as yours about a topic like this when I was your age, and maybe I would have been more apt to listen to friends, who might have not felt comfortable for the same reasons, because, we thought it was our fault at the time, and of sharing. I recently, before I published the book Hurt, Healing, and Hope, I learned from a friend, when we were about 16 years old or so, she was being assaulted repeatedly by someone that was close to her. And we were talking on the phone, and this is the first time I'm sharing something like this, live. We were talking on the phone, this one particular evening before I published, and I just started crying because I thought to myself, you know, what could I have done for her? And we talked about it, and she said, everything was okay now. And, she received help and things as well. And, I was happy about that. But I was thinking about the age I was, and I was only 16. If she had said something to me, how would I have reacted? I don't know, because back then it still wasn't really talked about. It's talked about more now, but still not as much as it needs to be, which is why this topic is so important on your podcast.
Mhm.
And it was just something that made me start thinking of, how can I reach a younger audience to give them suggestions of how to support someone that, might be going through something like that as well. I guess one of the things I think that is important, that for someone your age, is just being able to have those conversations. And if something is happening to you, if whoever's out there listening, confide in somebody. It might be a friend, it might be a family member, a counselor at your school. And that would be so important, because you are not alone. There are things happening to others that you might not know about either, and everything you're going through is not your fault. I think that's such a big piece of advice. And for those who are listening that might have heard from a friend that it happened to them, and just listening to them in a non-judgmental way, and thanking them for sharing that, with you, and helping get them to somebody that can also help. And also being able to take care of yourself after you've heard something like that, because I know that's another thing that's been hard for me, and or has been hard for me in the past, that I hear lots of disclosures of lots of people saying something's happened to them, whether it be as an advocate or now a published author about this topic. And also knowing that I need to, after I listen to them and take care of them and help them get to their next resource, or giving them information of how they can, heal, being able to take care of myself, take a few minutes to breathe, or to journal, or to walk my dog, and something like that, because that's also really important. The supporter needs to also be able to take care of them, to be able to help other people as well. Those are some very important things I learned, more so when I got into college. And I think they're really important for someone in the high school age group as well.
Thank you so much for that. I had a question related to what you said, where immediately after the incident, you mentioned that you kind of stopped going out to restaurants, you stopped wearing the same kind of clothing out of fear. Does that fear ever go away? Does it ever like get shallower, or does it still kind of stick with you?
For I think for me, I'm definitely taken lots of calculated risks since then. But after that happened, I didn't do those things. And then, as I had mentioned, I had a support group. So actually, here's an interesting story. One of the ways that I got back into going to restaurants was I had a friend and his girlfriend at the time. It was a couple. Wherever they went on the Friday night, when I finally did tell people what had happened to me, which was months later, but wherever they went on a Friday night, they would come to where I lived. They would pick me up, and whatever restaurant they went to, I went to. Whatever movie they went to, I went to. It didn't matter that I was not in a relationship with anyone. It didn't matter that it was just me. It didn't matter if I was wearing sweatshirts, because I didn't want to really dress up or anything like that anymore. I went wherever they went. So that was one of the things I think that helped me get out of the house in a safe way. And I had also, and I still do, a male friend of mine who is a big supporter of mine. And he would come to my apartment every Saturday. He would bring his school books. He would sit in front of me, and he said, "We're doing homework." So here's me at the time that I'm scared to be alone with somebody, especially a male, in a house. But here's this guy who, in a very non-evasive, safe way, says, "Melissa, I'm here to support you, and you're going to get through this too," and would come over and help me. He wouldn't help me with my homework, but he would sit there while he did his homework. I did my homework. So I was able to pass my classes because I kept studying. And I think that those were certain things that were maybe particular to my situation, that helped me get out of the fear and into to having some sort of normalcy, in life, because I was able to do things in these safe ways. And as people did start to find out about what happened to me, I think some of them were very helpful. And I remember one saying he wanted to invite me, another male friend, he wanted to invite me to it was a firefighters ball. And it was a dinner, it was in a different town. And at this point in time, which was within the year of being assaulted, I had a fear of abduction. And he knew, what had happened to me. And he said, this is what we're going to do. If you want to go, and you don't have to, we're going to put an address of where we're going. We're going to let someone know. We're going to text them before we leave, and we're going to call them when you get there. So, you can be as safe as you want. So it was for those experiences I was able to work through some of those fears. Do I still have fears now? Yes, because anything can happen. Unfortunately, especially as women, anything can happen to us. What are the precautions that I take? If I'm going to walk the dog at night, I have a phone, I have a flashlight, I have a little bottle maybe of pepper spray. So it's not letting that experience control all of my waking moments. It's living my life and still, but doing it in a safe way as we actually should and we need to, because we want to be safe, and we want to try to do the things that will keep us safe. So I think so. I would say in response to your question, I don't. I always am going to have that experience in my mind. I always it's part of the fabric of my life because it happened to me. So before, it used to be what defined me, but today it's just one of the many experiences that I've had in life. Is it good that it's happened? No. Do I want this to happen to anyone? Never. But at the same time, it did happen. And over the years, I've had to heal from that. And I've had to continue living to become a mother, to become a worker, to be able to have relationships with other people, friends, family, grocery store and things like that. Do I sometimes feel unsafe in certain environments or with certain people? Yes. And that's when you start to listen to yourself of, okay, you got to get out of this situation. So it's become that type of journey for me. I think in that sense. I'm not sure if that answers your question completely.
It definitely does. I've heard a lot about the metaphor where it's like your trauma won't get smaller, but you'll get bigger in a sense. So it does kind of get smaller in comparison. So I think that's kind of related to what you're saying. So I think
Mhm.
that's pretty cool. Another thing I thought was really interesting is when you talk about how your friend would come over with his homework and you do homework together. Because I think in a sense, when a lot of people find out that something like this has happened to one of their loved ones, they don't really know their next step. They might think, oh, I have to like be super aware of this topic and be like a really good like therapist friend in a sense. But like really it's like as you mentioned, like that's like even just something completely almost unrelated, just like helping them with their work, just helping them get out of the house even could be so impactful. I think that's an incredible takeaway for a lot of us. Like you don't need to do something big. You don't need to
Right.
even really understand exactly what they're feeling at any given time. Just have like a little bit of empathy. So thank you so much for sharing that bit of it.
What you just said is so on spot. So I really appreciate hearing your takeaway because that is one of the really important things as an advocate, that you don't have to have all the answers. You're not going to as a supporter. And you are there to listen, and you can just do these like the small things. Just being there for them is what makes the difference. And obviously, there are going to be people that they don't know what to say, they don't know what to do, and they might, just because of that, they might not interact anymore with the survivor. There might be people very close to somebody that gets angry and upset, and that's not helping the survivor in those respects as well. And I think those are moments where the person, when they have that reaction, that they're so angry and they're yelling at their survivor, well, how did this happen, where did it happen? They don't have to know everything. All the person really needs to do is listen, and like you said, ask the survivor maybe what they need. Hey, what can I get for you? And you want to do this, and keep trying, because that it's nothing against you. It's just that they're going through a really hard time. So I really appreciate how you just encapsulated everything. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for sharing that again. I had a question related back to when you were mentioning how you were in a manipulative relationship in high school. Again, like me and Isabel have mentioned, that is kind of like the demographic of our audience. And I know a lot of people at this age aren't really able to spot when a relationship is manipulative. So we're both wondering if you could kind of tell us how you figured out that that was not a healthy relationship.
Um, I had the manipulative, controlling relationship turned actually into stalking at one point. It was very difficult to get out of, and I would say that it, if somebody wants to research a little bit more on the topic, they might want to look at interpartner violence, IPV, and that would be really helpful resources for them, or dating violence. And this particular person that I was dating made all the decisions of, where we went and what I wore, who I could speak to, where were you at this time? I tried to call. Why are you wearing that? And there was actually one incident where I think it started, being something that I was recognizing as controlling. Is we were at the beach, and the particular person wanted to know why I was wearing a bathing suit. It was too revealing. I said, well, we are at the beach. It's a beach. I want to go swimming. It's too revealing. Well, you have to put something over that. People are going to look at you. Guys are going to look at you. And I said, well, I'm dating you. I'm at the beach. We're together. And they didn't like that. So that was, I think, for me, a big sign. And I think there was a lot of love bombing, I think is a common term that people use now. I remember walking in the house one day. It was Christmas Day. I had Christmas with my family, and then I went to this particular person's house, and I must have came back with 25 or 30 gifts of somebody that I was dating for a year. The look probably on my parents' face, I'm not sure if they're going to be listening to this, but I'm sure the look on my mother's face was, what is going on? This isn't, something is not right. Looking back at it now, that was not right. But that was that was months before the beach incident. So there were moments like that. And there were moments that this particular person wanted intimacy that I wasn't ready for and that I felt pressured for. So there's, those different things going on. And then it was when I did try to break up with that person went very, very off balance and came looking for me and said many things to me, saying that if they weren't alive in a year, it was because it was my fault and things like that. So there's those types of things that at the time I didn't look at it as being in a controlling relationship or a manipulative relationship. I didn't have the words for that when I was 15, 16, 17 years old. I do now. And so I think, for anyone who might be thinking that they're experiencing something like that, it's really important to talk to somebody about it, if you're not sure, and to know that if you don't want to be intimate, then you don't want to be intimate, and nobody has the right to pressure you to do that, because it's your body and you are the one in control of that. When I finally did break up with this person, they tried to fight with anyone that they saw me with on the college campus, because I was in college soon after that, and they would come and sit outside the building where I lived and wait for me. And I would go to class and I would come back, and there they would be, or they would be on some other part of campus. They were not a student on the campus. I ended up having to enlist help with the residence hall at the time that I lived at school, and also friends who had to walk with me to all my classes because I didn't feel safe to do that anymore. And then I finally reached out to a friend of that person's and let them know what was happening, to say, hey, could you control this person? So that was, really difficult time as well. This was pre-sexual assault. So, so yeah, I think anyone who thinks that they might be going through something like that, or recognizes themselves in, some of the intimate partner, violence or intimidation types of behaviors, if they see that they're in that type of situation, definitely reach out to a friend. It's the same. ideas, if you were sexually assaulted, that it's not your fault and that there are friends around there that could support you, or a counselor or a family member, an older brother or an older sister, because I think a lot of siblings might have gone through the same things that you just don't know about yet. And that happened in my case as well. I have two younger siblings, and it really was important for me to share with them what happened to me as well. And just because I wanted them to know that if they were going through something like that, they're not alone either, and I'm here for them as well.
Thank you so much for sharing about that. And definitely what you said about how it's never the victim's fault or the person who's being hurt in the relationship, because I think a lot of times in the relationship that you described that they may be made to feel that way by their significant other. So I'd also really like to ask you for us, like having our peers around us and for our audience, if we feel like someone might be in a manipulative relationship, how can we kind of spot that from an outside view and kind of help there?
A friend of mine, when I was in high school, actually, a friend of mine, she was pretty keen on to, I think, what was going on. And she tried always to talk to me in a loving way, saying, "Hey, what's going on? Have you seen so and so?" Is he was older than me, so that was, I think that was one thing that probably struck her, of why are we 15 and you're dating someone who's 18, 19 years old. So she had, she was really good. She is currently a very good friend of mine. She was very good at being able to converse. We had on our camp at our high school, we had something called peer educators, and they also went through training to help people who might be having mental health um, topics happening, like depression or potentially suicide. And another friend of mine was in the peer educators who helped people, at the school, who were also her peers. And she also asked me some key questions. Are you feeling all right? How is so and so treating you? What's going on? I noticed this. So it's just saying in that loving way, bringing it up to see what that person might be able to or willing to talk about. Oh, okay, if I didn't want to talk about it, and okay, if you ever, I'm always here for you. It's just making sure that you're open to being able to hear that. If there's, if it's someone that you don't know as well, perhaps talking amongst your friends group, oh, have you noticed that? Or have you noticed that when she's, with us, she's always checking her phone constantly? What's going on? Who's she talking with? So, but in a loving way, not as a judgmental way, but just trying to, observe those behaviors, and, being able to talk about that with your friend, saying, I've noticed that whenever we were together, you're always on your phone. And whenever so and so calls, you always leave the room. Is everything okay? What's happening? So just, maybe, you could follow up with those types of things as well. And just saying, hey, if you need anything, let me know. I know Mrs. K is a great listener, so maybe she's great. You could talk to her too. Whoever. And our vice principal at my high school was named Mrs. G. We called her. She was great. And people would, oh yeah, talk to Miss G. She's cool. She's cool. She's great. Tell her what's going on. She'll help you. So something like that. Just if there's someone identified at your school that might be good for listening, recommend that to your friend as well. Or and if you might even notice, oh, I've seen that guy doing this to this little kid at the school. Are you sure you want to be talking to him? Because you might know more about somebody that a friend of yours might be interested in.
Mhm.
But and also, I think it's important that for your age group and your generation, it's a different atmosphere than it was maybe when I was in high school. And people obviously have always, been LGBTQ, but it wasn't so open when I was in high school. Now it more so is. So I think we also have to look after those friends of ours as well, because they have a higher rate of not just sexual violence, just violence in general. And I know when I was in high school, I had a friend of mine that was bullied quite a bit, just because he identified as gay.
Mhm.
So I think that that is another type of friend, that we all have to look out for, to make sure that, they're not disproportionately, being bullied, and they also experience sexual violence, because it doesn't have anything to do with color or gender, or race or ethnicity, or immigration status, job status. It has nothing to do with anything. It can happen to anyone. So it's also just being aware that sometimes that might even look different depending on the culture, depending on the person. And then certain cultures, um, they might not have the way to talk about it because of cultural backgrounds. They might not have, let's say, if it's someone who's an immigrant, if they're from a country that doesn't have a lot of talk therapy, and then they come here and they're in a relationship, that is abusive, they might not even be able to talk about it. They might not have those words in their own language, depending on when they came here. And so those I think are also different vulnerable populations that we also have to look out for. And also knowing that men or boys are equally able to be being abused or assaulted as well, either by family members or friends. A lot of times, we know the victim, we know the perpetrators of it. There's someone that is close to us or that's in our school, or could be a parent or a relative or something as well. So it's being able to maybe observe that if you're at a friend's house and you see an older brother kind of just looking at your friend in a way that doesn't seem so brother. Hey, what's going on? Like, what's up with your brother? Finding the moment to do that, or taking your friend aside and, and talking to them about it too.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Um, yeah, almost everything you mentioned in this podcast episode, I feel like are all tangible things we can actually take away and apply to our lives. Like these are all things that we can check in our community. I'm really thankful that you mentioned a lot about like empathy too, like just looking out for people in our community, because we don't tend to be very like perceptive almost to the people directly next to us. But I think if all of us decided to just pay a bit more attention, then we could definitely like be catching on to things a bit sooner. So yeah, thank you for sharing that bit. And
And I just wanted to say, also know that if you don't catch on to it, it's not your fault either. Like, because that's how I kind of felt when I found out many years later about my friend, and sometimes, it's hard. There's a lot going on, and we're going through at your age, we're going through so much as well.
mhm.
So you don't want to beat yourself up either about things that you didn't catch on, just be the best friend you can be. And I think that's a good point for you, a good takeaway.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
I'm so grateful to be here.
Is there any last thing you want to bring up, say, recommend, promote as we come to an end?
No, if anybody is interested in learning more about me or my project, it is righthealthrive.com, or my name is Melissa B. Lombardo. So most of my social media is going to be Melissa B. Lombardo author. And I do have 2 books on Amazon to help people who are going through some of these things as a supporter or as a survivor. And it is the journal and the book. So there is Hurt, Healing, and Hope, Thriving Beyond Sexual Assault. In the journal is Right, Heal, Thrive, a transformative journaling experience. So people can, what's interesting about this book is that people can read it to themselves, they can read it out loud, or they can actually read it as a community theater. And they can get licensing rights to be able to take it to schools or universities or community theaters and to be able to perform it. And then there is a section with reflection questions afterwards to promote additional reflection, awareness about the topic. And there's also journal space at the end of the book where somebody who might be experiencing something or just wants to start journaling about what they felt, they can write about the topics at hand and kind of think, where would my own hurt, healing, and hope go in Melissa's book or performance piece. And then they can get the companion journal, and there's prompts and there's positive affirmations, and they can continue writing. Because for me, writing was one of the ways I was able to heal, and publishing was one of the ways I was able to take control of a narrative of something that I didn't have control over at that time. So I wanted to bring those same tools, like you said, practical, tools to others that they might be able to, find an additional path to healing or heal just that little bit more, or even start healing based on something, that was said or that was written. And there was people that came before me that inspired me to move forward and do something like this. And there's other authors out there as well that, I've started to read as well their own stories, and it just inspires me of, what we're capable of doing. And something like this podcast is another avenue. You're promoting education, awareness of the things that you talk about, and this is your way of making a positive impact in the world, because you don't know where this is going to go. One person might hear 3 words, "You got this," and that might help them get to the next step. Or they might know that, oh, I know her, I went to school with her. Or they might say, I go to school with someone like her, and I can talk to that person as well. So, you're really doing something special. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on. We'll make sure to check out all your writing, check out all your work. We'll have a link for everyone too. If you're listening to this, make sure to check out all those books. Yeah, thank you so much for listening, everyone. And thank you again, Melissa, for coming on.
Thank you.